Today we delve into the life of George Washington, the quintessential American hero. Born in 1732, Washington's path to greatness was evident from an early age. He was raised in colonial Virginia, where he quickly learned the tenets of leadership and responsibility. As the first president and a distinguished general, Washington even donned a powdered wig with an air of dignity. However, his legacy extends far beyond mere appearances. Washington was a man of principle, a leader who inspired and commanded respect. His visage graces the dollar bill, the quarter, and numerous monuments. But what elevates him to such a revered status? What qualities did he possess that warrant such widespread veneration? Yet, was he truly the paragon of virtue we often celebrate, or is there a more nuanced narrative? Let us explore this further. Was Washington an authentic American hero, or merely another complex figure in history? Scholars have long debated this, scrutinizing every facet of his life and leadership. We shall examine the merits and the controversies, much like a thorough analysis under the Patriot Act. We will consider the commendable, the questionable, and the contentious aspects of his legacy. It is undeniable that Washington was a pivotal figure. He was not merely a symbolic leader, he was actively involved in making critical decisions. He led the Continental Army to victory against the British Empire. This was no ordinary triumph, it was a grueling conflict that demanded strategic acumen, bravery, and resilience. Indeed, he confronted the mightiest empire of the time and emerged victorious. This victory was not merely a military achievement, it marked a pivotal moment in history. Subsequently, he became the inaugural president, establishing precedents that continue to shape the United States. From forming the cabinet to instituting the two-term limit, his influence remains profound. However, Washington's story is not without complexity. He was a multifaceted individual with his own set of flaws and controversies. From his stance on slavery to his political decisions, there is much to consider. Let's rewind to the American Revolution. Things were looking rough for the colonists. Enter George Washington, the reluctant leader who stepped up to the plate. He wasn't some military genius. He suffered losses, faced mutiny, and almost lost everything. But he persevered. Washington rallied his troops, inspired hope, and ultimately led them to victory. The man was a fighter, no doubt. He secured America's independence and earned his place as a national icon. After the war, Washington could have easily seized power. He could have been king, emperor, whatever he wanted, but he didn't. He believed in a government by the people, for the people. In 1789, Washington became the first president of the United States. He took on the challenge of leading a brand new nation, navigating uncharted territory. He wasn't perfect, no president is, but he laid the groundwork for the American experiment, establishing the presidency and proving that democracy could work. Washington knew a strong foundation was crucial for this new nation. He established the first cabinet, creating a system of advisors to guide the government. He oversaw the ratification of the Bill of Rights, ensuring fundamental freedoms for all citizens. He tackled economic issues, established foreign policy, and basically wrote the rule book for how the American government should function. His presidency set the standard for all who followed. Section 5, the two-term tradition, a peaceful transfer of power. After 2 terms, Washington did something radical. He stepped down. He could have held on to power, but he chose to set a precedent for a peaceful transfer of power. This was huge. It solidified the idea that America wasn't about one man. It was about the Constitution and the will of the people. His farewell address was basically a mic drop moment. He warned against political parties and emphasized the importance of national unity. Section 6, the shadow of slavery, a stain on Washington's legacy. Okay, time to address the elephant in the room, or should I say the enslaved people on his plantation. George Washington, the revered first president of the United States, was also a man who owned human beings as property. We can't talk about Washington without acknowledging the huge contradiction at the heart of his legacy, slavery. Despite his role in founding a nation built on the principles of freedom and liberty, he himself was a slave owner. Washington was a slave owner. He owned hundreds of enslaved people who worked on his Mount Vernon estate, performing grueling labor under harsh conditions. He inherited enslaved people as a teenager and profited from their forced labor throughout his life. This was not an uncommon practice among the wealthy landowners of his time, but it stands in stark contrast to the ideals he publicly championed. While he expressed some discomfort with slavery later in life, he never took concrete steps to dismantle the institution. His will did provide for the eventual emancipation of his slaves, but only after the death of his wife, Martha. In fact, he even helped solidify it through his presidency. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1793, which he signed into law, made it easier for slave owners to recapture runaway slaves, further entrenching the institution of slavery in the new nation. This is a dark stain on his legacy, a stark reminder that even our heroes were flawed. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truths about our history and the people we venerate. Washington's story is a complex one, filled with both admirable achievements and significant moral failings. Section 7. Native American Relations, a complex and troubled history. Another issue that casts a shadow on Washington's legacy is his treatment of Native Americans. He recognized the need for diplomacy, but also pursued policies that ultimately led to the displacement and dispossession of native tribes. He oversaw westward expansion, which resulted in conflict and treaties that were often broken. While he wasn't the only president guilty of this, his actions contributed to the systemic oppression faced by Native Americans. Section 8. Balancing the scales, weighing heroism and hypocrisy. So where does this leave us? On one hand, Washington was a brilliant military leader, a visionary president, and a champion of democracy. He helped create the America we know today, but he was also a flawed individual who benefited from and perpetuated systems of oppression. It's a tough pill to swallow, but it's the truth. We can't ignore the negative aspects of his legacy, just like we can't erase his achievements. We have to acknowledge both. Section 9. The enduring legacy, Washington's impact on America and the world. Despite his flaws, Washington's impact on America and the world is undeniable. He's a symbol of independence, leadership, and the enduring power of democracy. His story reminds us that even flawed individuals can achieve great things, but it also serves as a cautionary tale. It reminds us to critically examine our heroes, to acknowledge their complexities and contradictions. We can learn from their mistakes and strive to create a more just and equitable society. Section 10, final verdict, hero with flaws, a legacy and perspective. So, was George Washington a hero or a villain? This question has puzzled historians and scholars for generations. The answer, like most things in history, is complicated. Washington's life and legacy are a tapestry woven with both noble deeds and undeniable flaws. He was a product of his time, shaped by the societal norms and beliefs of his era. The 18th century was a period of great change and turmoil, and Washington was at the heart of it. He was a hero who fought for freedom and democracy, leading the Continental Army to victory against the British, and later becoming the first president of the United States. But he was also a flawed man who owned slaves, a fact that casts a long shadow over his legacy. His Mount Vernon estate was maintained by the labor of enslaved people, a stark contradiction to the ideals of liberty he championed. Additionally, Washington contributed to the displacement of Native Americans, as the expansion of the new nation often came at the expense of indigenous peoples. We can admire his achievements while acknowledging his shortcomings. His leadership and vision helped shape the United States, but his actions also reflect the moral complexities of his time. Ultimately, it's up to each of us to grapple with his legacy, to understand the full scope of his impact on history. We must look at both the good and the bad, the triumphs and the failures. By learning from both his triumphs and his mistakes, we can gain a deeper understanding of our own history and the values we hold dear. And maybe, just maybe, we can use his story to create a more perfect union, one that lives up to the ideals he fought for. A union that strives for justice, equality, and freedom for all its citizens. In the end, George Washington's legacy is a reminder that history is complex and that our heroes are often imperfect. But it is through this complexity that we can find the true lessons of the past and use them to build a better future.